Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And this is the month of May, and other than May Day, May 1st, there don't seem to be any other holidays, at least in America. I'm not sure when 端午节 is this year, but in any case, we're talking about a celebration that takes place in the United States that celebrates Mexican pride, and that is Cinco de Mayo, which means the 5th of May in Espanol.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it because I grew up in the state of Arizona, which is right next door to Mexico. So we've got a lot of Mexican citizens that live in my state. And it's kind of a fun holiday. They get all dressed up. There's lots of music and good food. I love Mexican food. It's probably my favorite. People just get together to celebrate life, really.
Indeed, and this is primarily celebrated in the United States for people of Mexican heritage, not so much in Mexico itself, with the exception of Puebla, which we'll get to later in our lesson for today. So let's find out what this is all about. Let's listen to the entire contents of our lesson now one time. In the U.S., Cinco de Mayo, meaning the 5th of May in Spanish, is a fun holiday filled with drinking and partying. Because the holiday is mostly celebrated in the U.S., you may wonder where its Spanish name comes from. The answer is that the celebration is actually a Mexican one. To find Cinco de Mayo's origins and to understand what it's all about, we must take a trip back to the mid-1800s. During the 19th century, the Mexican government fought a series of nasty wars and had to borrow money from European countries, including France. By 1861, it became clear that the government was unable to pay back its loans, so these countries sent representatives to negotiate. France, however, wanted more than just its money. It saw an opportunity to expand its empire. In 1862, France declared war and carried out an invasion, viewing the city of Puebla as a strategic target. The French military assaulted Puebla on May 5th, but suffered a defeat to the numerically inferior Mexican forces. Since then, Cinco de Mayo has been a celebration of Mexican pride and resilience against aggression. While Mexican forces won the battle, Cinco de Mayo is not the country's Independence Day, as is often mistakenly believed. In the U.S., the first Cinco de Mayo celebration was likely held in California not long after the Battle of Puebla to generate support for Mexico during the Second Franco-Mexican War. It later became about celebrating Mexican heritage and culture and reached a wider American audience after 1933, when President Roosevelt initiated the Good Neighbor policy. This was intended to improve relations between the U.S. and its southern neighbors.
Okay, folks, let's get started. This is our festival unit, and we're talking about a big festival, at least that's celebrated in America, but is something that they celebrate to remember Mexican heritage. And we've got a lot of Mexicans, of course, who have come to America to live. So it's good to remember your heritage, where you came from, and some of the culture from your former home, of course. You want to remember that as well. So here we are. We're going to be in the U.S., and it's Cinco de Mayo. If you're not a Spanish speaker, you're going to say Cinco de Mayo. That's how it's said in English. But Cinco de Mayo is more likely or closer to the Spanish pronunciation. And it really just means Cinco, 5. Day is of, and then Mayo is May. So that's a pretty easy translation there. So it means the 5th of May in Spanish. And it is a very fun holiday filled with drinking and partying. So there are lots of parties you can go to. You can dress up. I usually see the colors of Mexico during this period of time, which if I just had to guess, I would say are green, red, and white. You see a lot of that, at least in my state of Arizona, around this time of the year. And I love it because there's also a lot of Mexican food that's being passed around or provided at parties you might go to.
Right, so we are drinking probably alcoholic beverages. They've got non-alcoholic beverages as well. But if you drink Mexican alcoholic beverages, you might have some tequila, some mezcal, some pulque, and you might have some beer like 3X or Carta Blanca or Corona. Of course, that's a Mexican beer as well. And because the holiday is mostly celebrated in the U.S., you may wonder where its Spanish name comes from. Yes, indeed, if it's celebrated mostly in the United States, where the heck did this holiday come from? Well, the answer is that the celebration is actually a Mexican one. Okay, so the origin is from Mexico. It comes from Mexico, and it's based on an historical event that took place in Mexico during the 1800s, as we're going to find out. But it's actually a Mexican celebration, again, even though it's mostly celebrated in the United States.
Right. So we're going to go back in time, go back in history. In fact, our author here wants us to take a trip back to the mid-1800s when things were kind of crazy, at least in the world there in the West. During the 19th century, it says, the Mexican government fought a series of nasty wars. So we're going to go back in time. And we're going back to kind of look at a series of wars that were being fought. And the Mexican government, of course, was involved. A series just means one thing after another. We usually talk about a TV series where there'll be one episode each week. Or if you're on Netflix, there will be several episodes in a series that you're watching. Here it's a series of wars, and we're describing them using this adjective nasty, which means really unpleasant. It can be physically unpleasant. Oh, the weather's so nasty today. It's raining and cold, or it's so hot. That's nasty to me. I hate hot weather. Or it could be a person being nasty to you. Maybe they're really rude, or they use foul language, or they're just really impolite or selfish, nasty. So you can use nasty in a lot of different ways. Something can taste nasty, just really ugh. So we use this quite often. It's a word that you should definitely put into your vocabulary.
Yeah, the last time my cousin Alan was trying to cook for us, there was a nasty smell coming from the kitchen. Nobody wanted to eat what he was cooking. And yes, indeed, the Mexican government fought a series of nasty wars and had to borrow money from European countries, including France. One of those nasty wars was with the United States, if you want to know.
True.
The Americans went down to Mexico City there, and they went to Veracruz and other places. I don't know the details. It was before the American Civil War. But in any case, if you go to war, of course, you need to buy guns and bombs and stuff. So they owed a lot of money. They borrowed money from European countries, which included France. And by the year 1861, it became clear that the government was unable to pay back its loans. So these countries sent representatives to negotiate. A loan is when somebody gives you money. You can get a loan from the bank, for example, if you want to buy a car or if you want to buy a house or something like that. You get a loan. And remember, you borrow money from someone or you lend money to someone.
Yeah, in Chinese, it's the same word, but it's different in English, as Tom just said. If you have the money, you're the one with all the big bucks, then you're lending money to someone. And if you're the one receiving the money, you're getting a loan from someone. A loan can be a noun or a verb. You can loan someone money. Maybe your friend forgot his school lunch money, so you're going to loan your friend 100 NT dollars. And then the next day, your friend's going to pay you back or return that money. Well, some countries continue to do this. They will loan poorer countries money, and then when the poorer country can't pay the money back, which they hardly ever can, then that more powerful country will come in and take land or things that belong to the poorer country. We see it in today's world as well, especially in Africa. This continues to happen. So they wanted to just negotiate on how to repay those loans. So what happened is France sent some people over to Mexico to negotiate. If you negotiate with someone, you talk about coming up with a deal or a bargain where you'll do this and then they'll do that. And then if you agree, sometimes you'll sign a contract. But you want to negotiate terms or decide who is going to do what in this particular deal.
Right, so they wanted to talk it over and to reach some agreements. France, however, wanted more than just its money. It saw an opportunity to expand its empire. So France, of course, is one of the colonial powers from Europe, and they were all over the world taking over countries and establishing colonies overseas. So the French were really anxious to spread their cheese and wine to other parts of the world and get them to speak French. And so they saw an opportunity to expand their empire. To expand just means to increase the size of something. And yes, indeed, they already controlled large parts of Africa, for example. They had colonies in Southeast Asia, so they thought, let's get some more land here. Let's get Mexico. We can get all their chocolate or something like that.
Well, yeah, because that's what we got to the cacao from was Mexico, or at least South America. So, yeah, this is what they were trying to do. Back in the mid-1800s, France and the UK, or England back then, England was also trying to expand and take over lands and increase their empire. We're going to find out more about history, guys, but first, we're going to take a break and listen to our Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天要来带大家看一个节庆哦，是5月5日节。很特别。对，你老师5月5日节哦，就是5月5日吗？那是什么节呢？哦，它就是5月5日节哦，没有啦。其实墨西哥语真的就出现在它标题这个地方。5月5日节这个叫做 Cinco de Mayo，Cinco de Mayo 其实就是5月的第5天。那它到底是什么样的一个节庆呢？它是一个墨西哥的节庆哦。它在西班牙文当中本来就是5月5日，而且这天在美国啊，会是一个充满饮酒欢聚、很有趣的一个 holiday。 我们在这个文章的第一段啊，第一句首先看到一个非限定用法关系子句的简化，从逗点之后 meaning 这个地方，因为它要解释 Cinco de Mayo 是什么 which means 本来应该是补充说明它指的就是5月的第5天啦。那 which 如果删掉的话，动词直接变成动词 ing， 就会形成一个关系子句的简化。好，那这个节日主要是在美国在庆祝。那你想说奇怪，在美国庆祝怎么会有一个 Cinco de Mayo 这种西班牙文呢？答案其实是因为它是来自墨西哥的一个庆祝活动。好，我们来看一下第一段，同样在第二句这个地方。第二句其实后面的 wonder 纳闷，你可能会想这一件事情，注意后面的 where 它不是真正的直接问句哦，它是一个间接问句，所以这个时候 where 带出来的它并不是问句，我们就会看到主词 its Spanish name 跟后面的动词 comes from 就不能造成问句了。好，那既然它是一个墨西哥的节庆活动的时候，我们到底就要来看看它的 origin 起源。这个时候我们就要回到19世纪中期的时候，所以文章呢来到了第二段，我们就回到西元19世纪的时候，当时的墨西哥政府其实打了一连串惨烈的战争，所以他们不得不就包括像法国啊之内那些欧洲国家，他们都借了很多钱，也就是说这些国家呢借了很多钱帮墨西哥政府呢打仗，但是到了西元1861年第二段到第二句的地方，墨西哥政府很显然根本没有办法有能力还款。在第二段第二句我们看到逗点之后的 it， 这里的 it 是一个虚主词的用法哦。It became clear 什么事呢？真主词从后面的 that 一直到最后面句尾逗点 loans 这个地方。好，那既然没有办法还款，那怎么办呢？这个时候这个债权人就要来讨债啦，也就是说这些欧洲国家包括法国在内，他们就派出了代表 to negotiate 来谈判，就是要讨债啦。但是法国 他想要的不仅仅是钱，他还注意到这个时候是他扩张殖民版图的一个机会哦。同样在第二段第三句，我们特别注意一下，句子当中有一个标点符号叫做分号，分号它本身就有连接词的功能，所以分号的前后都会有完整的子句，包括动词。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. It's our festival unit, and we're focusing on a festival that actually is Mexican in nature, but it's celebrated mostly in America these days, and it's called Cinco de Mayo, the 5th of May. And it's a fun holiday that we celebrate in the U.S., at least those who have Mexican heritage and who want to remember their Mexican heritage and their culture. So we're actually right now talking about where we even got this particular festival from. And we have to go back in history. We went back to the mid-1800s. And during that time, the Mexican government was fighting a series of nasty wars, one after another. A lot of people wanted what Mexico had. The temperature is really nice there. It's easy to grow things. And it's also surrounded by beautiful water and oceans. And the beaches are nice there. Who wouldn't want part of Mexico? And we found out before we went on a break that France was willing to lend the Mexican government money in order to provide Mexico with the arms they needed to fight these wars. But, of course, you know, if you borrow money and you can't pay it back, then the person who lent you the money wants something in return. And so when we left you, we were talking about how France sent people to negotiate with Mexico and come to an arrangement because they couldn't pay back the money.
Right, but France was greedy and they saw an opportunity to expand their empire. So in 1862, France declared war and carried out an invasion, viewing the city of Puebla as a strategic target. Now, Puebla is east of Mexico City. Mexico City is kind of elevated quite high, so maybe Puebla was sort of a stepping stone. If they get Puebla first, then they can go into Mexico City and take over the whole country. And yes, indeed, in 1862, they were fed up with Mexico owing them money, but the French were using this as an opportunity to invade. So they carried out an invasion. If you carry something out, you perform this thing, you make plans for it, you arrange all the details, and then you do that thing. You carry out an invasion here. You could carry out some kind of project for your company, for example, if you want to do some research and open up a new market for your product. You're going to carry out a survey or something like that to talk to people about their opinions about your products or something like that. But in this particular case, France basically invaded Mexico, or at least tried to.
So they wanted to carry out an invasion where they send their troops over there. And they saw the city of Puebla as a strategic target. That's one of the cities that would make their overall war with Mexico more successful if they could first take over the city of Puebla. So the French military assaulted Puebla on May 5th. And there's our date right there, Cinco de Mayo, but suffered a defeat to the numerically inferior Mexican forces. It's very hard to fight a war away from your base country. So usually the country that you're fighting the war in has an advantage over those who have to come from a long distance to fight you. But not always, but that's usually the case. If you assault someone, you hit them, you attack them, you can be charged with assault. If you've hurt somebody by the police, they will charge you with assault. And assault can be both a verb and a noun. Here, we're using it as a verb. They assaulted the city of Puebla.
Right, exactly. But they suffered a defeat at the hands of the inferior Mexican forces. They were numerically inferior, I should say. That means having to do with numbers. Basically, there were fewer Mexican soldiers than there were French ones. And yes, indeed, as you said, the Mexicans' hearts were in it. It was their homeland. They were trying to defend it. And the French soldiers, well, maybe they just weren't really interested in helping out with the cause. They were probably wondering why they can't hang out at a sidewalk cafe and smoke cigarettes and drink wine and
drink tequila. Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right. They wouldn't want tequila. They'd want their wine.
They'd want their wine. They'd want their crepe Suzette or their filet mignon or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yes, indeed. That's probably one of the reasons why they did not win this battle. They suffered a defeat. They lost. They were defeated. And since then, since that day, Cinco de Mayo has been a celebration of Mexican pride and resilience against aggression. So yes, indeed, that day was very fateful there. They defeated the French and sent them packing back to Paris. Maybe the French tried in other places. I'm not too clear on the history of this conflict here. But in any case, the Mexicans were quite proud of that, and they remembered that day, and then it became a holiday.
Right. So if you have a lot of pride in your country, you're resilient. Just means you're able to bounce back after you've suffered a loss. Maybe you've been sick, but you're really resilient, so you're able to recover and regain your health. Or maybe you have gone into bankruptcy, you've lost your money. If you're resilient, you can bounce back and recover from that. Continue going. Now, it says, while Mexican forces won the battle, Cinco de Mayo is not the country's Independence Day. So our Independence Day in America is July 4th. So, yeah, this isn't their Independence Day, but it was a big deal that they beat the very rich and wealthy country of France, at least their soldiers.
But, of course, an Independence Day means you're independent from another country at some point, like Mexico used to be governed by Spain. The United States were controlled by England. You get the idea. And yes, indeed, the first celebration in the United States was likely held in California not long after the Battle of Puebla to generate support for Mexico during the Second Franco-Mexican War. So California, of course, is in the United States, but it used to be part of Mexico. A large part of the American West used to be part of Mexico. California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, all those states, including Texas, were all part of Mexico at one point. Although I think when this war took place, California was part of the United States, but there were still lots of Mexican people living there, so there was support there for a celebration. And yes, indeed, they generated support for Mexico during the Second Franco-Mexican War by having that celebration in California. So here we've got the verb to generate, which means to cause something to happen, to provide the energy for something. For example, we're always looking for new ways to generate electricity.
Yeah.
So we're not so dependent on petroleum or coal or things like that.
Yeah, so generate just means to produce. So you can generate lots of different things. Actual things like energy, but you can also generate enthusiasm. If you're a teacher and you want your kids to be excited, you might choose to use a fun teaching technique. Or maybe you're having a party and you want to generate publicity. So you hand out flyers and use word of mouth to let people know. So generate is a great word to put into your vocab as well. So yeah, they were able to generate support for Mexico during the Second Franco-Mexican War. It later became about celebrating heritage and culture. And so that's why it's so fun, at least in the States, because there's lots of good food and parties to go to. And it also reached a wider American audience after 1933. More Americans understood what Cinco de Mayo was about. And later, more people became aware because the President of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, who was president during World War II, he initiated something he called the good neighbor policy, which is kind of like saying, hey, let's not just, fight with our neighbors all the time and start wars. How about we try to get along?
Right. So, of course, he intended to improve relations, or this particular policy was intended to do this. If you intend to do something, that's what you plan to do, or that's what you mean to do. I intend to marry you. I intend to attend the University of North Dakota, or something like that. So, yes, indeed, they wanted to improve relations between the U.S. and its southern neighbors. So, that would include other countries besides Mexico. The countries south of the United States would include Nicaragua, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Cuba, etc., etc. They wanted to improve their relations with those countries to foster trade and diplomatic missions and things like that. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today, but we need to hear from our Chinese teacher before we say goodbye.
所以就趁机讨债的时候，在这个1862年，法国就宣布了战争，发动入侵。他把哪一个城市视为一个战略目标，要攻下它呢？就是墨西哥的 Puebla 这个城市。那这个时候，法国5月5日就进攻 Puebla， 说你不还我钱，我要打下你这个城市。结果居然还输给墨西哥军队耶！这个墨西哥军队的数量还比法国出兵的数量还要少。好，我们来看一下，这个太精彩了。在第二段第4句的地方，首先这一句话包含有分词构句，怎么说呢？分词构句一定就是连接词省略，动词变成分词。哪个动词变分词？其实这句话本来有3个动作：一 declare 就是宣战的宣；2 carried out 就是所谓的去发动 invasion 嘛，发动入侵；第3逗点之后，因为这2个动作发动战争啊，然后发动入侵，其实同时他们就是视 Puebla 是一个他们的攻击目标，所以视 A 为 B 的 view A as B， 我们看到了 viewing the city of Puebla as a strategic target。好，所以我们说啊，这个墨西哥军队厉害嘞，人数上少于法国军队，居然还赢了耶！所以墨西哥人当然 they feel proud， 就觉得很骄傲啊，而且这是他们抵御这个入侵啊，表现他们韧性的一个庆典。所以第6句当中这些关键字就很重要，包括 Mexican pride， 还有一个所谓的 resilience， 这个韧性，这些都是关键字。那接下来第7句我们就看到，不过啊，因为虽然墨西哥军队打赢这场战役，但是并不是我们想象的这就是墨西哥独立节，不是。但是5月5号对他们来说很重要。但是同样在第2段第7句这个地方，我们要特别注意一下 while 在这里啊是 although 虽然的意思，而后面的逗点之后的 as 在这边要跟大家介绍一个新的词，这个文法很讨厌，叫做准关代。准关代你不要管它，就把它当成关代就好了。也就是说这里的 as 把它当成 which， 它代替的就是前面的 the country's Independence Day which is often mistakenly believed， 也就是大家所常常会误认为说5月5号那一天是他独立纪念日的那一天，但是其实不是。那后来在美国嘛，因为有一些包括想要争取这个墨西哥支持啦，一些敦亲睦邻政策之后，所以5月5日通常都是在美国庆祝的一个庆典活动。以上是我们今天的内容，我们明天还会谈谈5月5日到底要吃什么好料的哦。我是安娜，明天见。
Guys, that's it for today, but we have another day to talk about Cinco de Mayo, how it's a celebration of Mexican pride. We hope you'll join us for our next program. For English Digest, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Tom. Goodbye.
Bye.